Welcome back to the Fantasy Hockey Podcast. It is time for the very special episode that we talked about. Yes, it is Keeping Karlsson back on the show. A lot of people asked for it, but we have Brian and Elon back. Unfortunately, they are not kicking Brandon off the show. Brandon also had to join in, but we do have Brandon as well. But
Rude.
I know for all of you, I mean, let's be real. People are.
I disapprove of this intro.
Of course you do.
That was actually the condition that we came on the show was only if Brandon was here.
I know it's everyone kind of wanted me kicked out, but I had the condition that I had to be on the show. I wasn't happy to just edit it. So unfortunately, I'm on the show, I guess is the right way to do this intro. But anyways, Keeping Karlsson is on the show with us. We're going to walk through some of the lines so far. So we're going to go through the Central Division and the East Division and go through what the lines are at right now and just take a stab at what it means for certain players. And in case you're wondering where the North and the West is, if you care about the West, honestly, there's like two teams in the West, so maybe you care about two of those. But if you care about those divisions, go over to the Keeping Karlsson episode. So the episode where we do the same for the North and the West division is on the Keeping Karlsson side. And I'll give them in a second a way to tell you how to find their amazing podcast in case you somehow haven't heard of them yet, because they came far before us. They are the elite podcast for fantasy hockey. And so how about before all of this, you guys tell people where to find you.
You're too kind. Thanks for having us on. Really excited. We already recorded those first two divisions and it was a blast. Yeah, check it out on our feed. So you can find it just by searching for Keeping Karlsson as an Eric Karlsson, not John Karlsson, because we still believe in Eric Karlsson here on this podcast. So
not that we don't not believe in John Karlsson.
He's fine. He's okay.
Yeah. I never thought of that. There's a lot of longevity to your podcast by the nature that you can change the Karlsson to a different spelling and it still makes sense.
We have a fantasy league that we're running.
William lined up.
In our fantasy league, we have a whole bunch of divisions named after all the different Karlssons. There's Linus, there's Melker, there's William, and who knows who's coming down the pipe. But okay, yeah, so just search for Keeping Karlsson on your podcast feed. You'll find it. It was a really fun episode. I know it because we already recorded it. But now I'm really excited for this one.
Well, so let's jump in to the Central Division. That's where we're going to start off first. So let's go over first to the Columbus Blue Jackets, who honestly, for the most part, seems pretty much what we expected a little bit. This is tweeted on January 5th. We're recording this January 5th, a very crazy day in the world. And here we are talking about fantasy hockey lines. It actually feels really good. So let's start off with them. Tessier, Dubois, and Bjorkstrand on the top line. And then the second line is Foligno, Domi, and Atkinson. Kind of surprised, actually, that Domi got that second line deployment. And then on defense, the predictable Werenski, Jones pairing, and Korpisalo and Merzlikins in net. So how do you guys feel about those lines? Like, does anyone increase in value for you, decrease in value? Is it what you expected? Where are you at?
It's actually interesting. So you thought that Mikko Koivu was going to be centering the second line instead of Domi?
Yeah, I didn't expect Domi to be top six. I thought he'd be kind of pushed out of that, but apparently I was wrong.
Well, I mean, this is the practice lines, right? So Tortorella has lots of time to learn to hate Max Domi, and so we'll see what happens. I guess to me, it's like I expected this because we saw at the end of last year and into the playoffs with Bjorkstrand and Texier playing with Dubois. If anything, it just makes me as excited as I already was for Texier, because also we saw that he made, the power play lines that were tweeted, he wasn't on that top unit. He was on one with Domi, Werenski, Grigorenko, and Bemstrom. But yeah, like I think Bjorkstrand, and obviously Bjorkstrand, right? I feel like we've already just assumed that Bjorkstrand is like there. It's like not that long ago that he was like a nobody in fantasy as someone like maybe he'll be good one day. And all of a sudden, like at the end of last season, he totally broke out. And now once again, he's bumped Atkinson from that spot with Dubois. So I don't see any reason why Bjorkstrand just can't continue to go on that tear that he started last year.
Yeah, I mean, Bjorkstrand to me is the sleeper for the year. That's what it feels like. Brandon always, what do you always say about Bjorkstrand? You say that Bjorkstrand is what we always thought Atkinson would be, or is what we want Atkinson to be, right?
Yeah, he's what we always wanted Atkinson to be already, basically.
Yeah, I'm excited for him. You know, Tessier is an interesting one. I did not expect Tessier to get that top line deployment. That's kind of interesting, at least for deeper leagues and especially like dynasty leagues and whatnot. I'm kind of interested about that.
Yeah, well, you look at who else is in that top six, and like usually when you see a strange line combination in preseason, you're like, oh well, he's going to be bumped for, and then you look down the line, it's like no one. Like there's really, like, the only way I could see Texier bumped is, I mean, but if they want him to play center on the third line, which they've sort of had him penciled in to do in the past, but now they have Koivu and Boone-Jenner, both of who can do that job, are practically made for that job. So I guess the only other name to consider here might be someone like Emil Bemstrom, who I know Elon likes as somebody who could come out of nowhere and like make an impact and sort of be the Bjorkstrand of this year, if that makes sense. You know, the way you could pick Bjorkstrand off the waiver wire. And then like we saw that opportunity coming for him. We were so excited for him to get it. I'm so glad he got it. But with any of these guys, I'm still like, my constant line is that the opportunity in Columbus is limited. Like it's extremely unlikely that any Blue Jacket is going to be able to score more than 70 points. And I honestly think it's going to be a struggle to even get all the way up to 70 points. And if you need an example, look at Artemi Panarin, right? Who was a point per game guy in Columbus. Fantastic. It's like, oh, is that all he can do? No, he like was way over a 100-point pace his first year with the Rangers. And so like you see that the Columbus and Tortorella do play a system that chokes some of the offensive potential out of these guys, which is a shame. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that you should overlook guys like Bjorkstrand and Dubois. And Texier does make a decent late round flyer if he does hang around on the top line with them beyond training camp.
Yeah. I do wonder what he can do on the top power play for whatever reason he can find his way on there, which I doubt. I mean, you could always have Foligno maybe on the top line too, because we know how much Tortorella loves Foligno.
Loves him.
Loves Nick Foligno
hits
forever.
a lot. So don't forget about him in banger leagues.
Yeah,
he hits a lot.
And he's still on the top power play. I guess I'll mention also Seth Jones. Sometimes Columbus goes with two defensemen on the top power play, but as the lines that were tweeted out today or yesterday, I had Seth Jones on the top power play and then Werenski on PP2. So I think Jones has been following a lot in a lot of leagues this year, because last year he wasn't so exciting offensively. But if he's back on the top power play and Bjorkstrand is having this breakout continue, that's probably great news for Seth Jones. Maybe you should bump him up a little bit.
Yeah,
Nick Foligno, by the way, is one day going to retire, and John Tortorella is going to put a top power play unit out of 4 skaters just in tribute to the missing Foligno.
I feel like he'd immediately get hired as an assistant coach. Just, he always needs to be next to Tortorella somehow, some way. He needs to be there. It's not right if Foligno's not there. So that is Columbus. I mean, I think
I want to add one little thing about Seth Jones. Small anecdote. I definitely hear you about how everybody fades, or well, rightfully, honestly, for the longest time would fade Seth Jones off of his ADP, whatever was given in the preseason. He was always a little bit overrated, and then people would kind of realize, like, wait a minute, like, what am I actually getting here? And then he would kind of fall to where he should be drafted towards, third defenseman or something that may not get you a lot of power play points. If he is able to keep top power play for any good amount of time, and actually if they can make something happen on the power play, for the love of God, because they not be the last place team on the power play, Jones could really break out. I was actually weirdly able to get him at pick 166 recently, and I didn't even want him. It was like, you're gonna give me this much value, I can't continue to not draft Seth Jones at this point.
I'm also gonna throw out that he's taken some heat in the quote unquote analytics community for just not being as good a defenseman as everyone's just assumed him to have been over the course of his career, which, I mean, unfortunate for his on ice play, should it be true. And I think they have a point, but great that it does knock down his fantasy value, and is probably one of the reasons he's falling in your drafts. Solid floor. You can count on him for 40 points at least, hopefully more, especially with some good power play deployment. Great peripheral contributions too. Seemingly very underrated. I'm actually looking in our listener league, the Cupful, the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League. Jones was drafted 83rd overall on average, and Werenski 78th. So they're pretty much being drafted one after the other.
That makes sense.
I do think this news gives Jones a little bit of a bump up, though. Elon said, I definitely like the fact that Jones is solo on the power play. That'd be huge for him if that does stick.
Seeing these lines make me quite happy about getting him as late as I did.
That's crazy. That's crazy value that you got, Brandon.
Yeah.
That league is, by the way, the Fantasy Hockey Trades Hockey Fights Cancer Charity League. So it's against a bunch of other Twitter personalities and analysts, and for a good cause.
For sure.
And so I get to smoke people with my Seth Jones in the 12th or whatever.
Oh, you're going to hold that against
for charity.
You always do. So, Brandon, you take us into Chicago, which is the next team here in the Central.
Wait, we just skipping Carolina? I'm going to Carolina. Leave me alone.
Is Carolina second?
I don't
Carolina is second. I guess so.
Carolina's
You know what?
first, if we're
Actually,
going
technically
alphabetical,
Carolina's
but-
first. If we're doing, I screwed this up already. Yeah, just take us to wherever
It doesn't
we
matter.
need
Who
to go.
cares?
Start
We're all in the
over.
same division at least.
Just start the whole
you
thing
didn't say
over.
Boston or something. And Carolina's interesting, right? I feel like I have a feeling a lot of listeners already know where this is going.
Just say what you want to
Svechnikov,
say. Mhm.
One of the most hyped players that we were kind of warning, like we don't really know what to expect from a line perspective from Carolina in general, but especially for Svechnikov himself, who's being taken, sometimes late first even. Anyway, Svechnikov currently playing with Trocheck and Jesper Fast, and Niederreiter is playing with Aho and Teravainen.
2 days in a row now, by the way.
Yeah, this continues. They've made a point to say Nino again on Aho line with Teravainen.
Yeah, I think it's so an intro. I just want to chime in really quick here because I know where Brandon's going to go with this. I don't think it necessarily means. I know exactly. You know exactly what you're trying to say here. You're trying to say I'm right. But anyways, I don't think it means Svech is off of the top line for good. I think it just, to me, if I were thinking about Svech at anywhere near his ADP, it would scare me that now it's 2 practices in a row he's not there. They're at least thinking about it. There's that possibility that Svech can come off that top line. So I guess I'll throw it now to the Keeping Karlsson crew. I think Svech is the guy to talk about on this, obviously. Svech and Nino are the 2 to talk about. So what does this change anything for you guys when it comes to Svech?
I'm just having terrible deja vu. I know you're asking me about Svechnikov, but I cannot stop feeling the way I felt last season about Nino Niederreiter starting on the top line when I still held a candle for Nino Niederreiter going into last season. I thought, he's never had a ton of sustained opportunity. When he was traded to Carolina, he just caught fire and was amazing and seemed to have earned himself a spot in the top 6, a really good spot. And he started there at the start of the season last year, and he was awful. He lasted about 15 games there and then got another turn around game. Just looking at the Hockey Viz line combo data here, he got another 20 game turn around the 20 game mark of the season, and again did absolutely nothing with it. And I am ashamed to say he was on my roster for far too many of those 30 combined games where he was on the top line doing nothing. Meanwhile, Svechnikov was not up there, and he didn't miss a beat. He was just destroying the world in the first, I don't know if you remember that at the start of last season.
Insane.
Yeah, he started with he pointless in his first game. What the hell, Svechnikov? But then 2 points in each of his next 4 games. So he had no problem producing consistently away from Aho and Teravainen. So I'm really honestly, I'm not that concerned about Svechnikov here, and I'm doing my very best to not have my interest peaked about Nino Niederreiter.
Give me fuel, give me fire, give me Nino Niederreiter. But no, I definitely will not draft Nino Niederreiter. I know.
How long were you holding on to that one? I feel like you were just waiting.
I was hoping that Brian would be into Niederreiter so I could make fun of him, but he's already taken care of saying he's let that go. I'm definitely also with Brian that I'm not worried at all about Svechnikov. If I have a draft coming up, I'm hoping I'm going to be sending this tweet to everyone in my league. I'm oh, don't draft Niederreiter. Look, he's on the second line with Trocheck and Fast. Forget about him. And then hopefully I can get him because he's I don't think people even realize last year when he was so amazing, right? Almost a 75-point pace. He wasn't even outside of being a teenager. He was 19 years old. This will be his first year as his 20s. I feel just the sky's the limit on this guy. And I don't know. I don't think it really even matters what line he's on, but also I just think that probably he is going to get a long look, if not most of the season on the top line anyway with Aho and Teravainen.
What position would you draft him in? I think the concern that I have with Svech is that, at least on Yahoo, his ADP is something like 17, which my kind of mantra on early picks is I don't gamble at all on my early picks. I look for high floor guys with decent ceilings, and I don't see that in Svech. I feel like his floor is still reasonably low. Even if he produced it last season, maybe he's worth 17 overall at a 75 point pace guy with decent peripherals. It's not like he didn't have great shots either. I feel like everybody remembers him as an amazing shooter. He didn't even shoot 3 times a game.
Yeah,
which is I feel like that's the minimum of great shooting to me.
I hear that. And like while you're talking about floor in your early picks, like I'm like that's one way I'm concerned. I'm also concerned about ceiling. And if you look at Aho as the guy to beat on Carolina, point per game, right? Which is great, fantastic. But it's sort of the same way that I would never draft Vladimir Tarasenko in my first few rounds when other people were, or maybe first few rounds is going a little far. But, I want somebody who has that 90, 100-point upside. And I think Svechnikov might have that in the prime of his career, which I think he's probably still at least 2 years away from being in. So yeah, in the meantime, I feel like in the Cupful, he was drafted at 21st on average. The earliest he was drafted was 17th. The latest was 29th. So I feel like that is like, he seems like a second round or early third round kind of pick, but I don't think he's making it out of the second round in a lot of drafts.
Yeah, I think to me, the thing that will cap Svech's ceiling this year, if he doesn't get that top line, is just his minutes. I think his minutes will cap that ceiling more than anything, just especially him being a shooter, right? Like if he's a shooter and a kind of goal first guy, which I don't necessarily know if he is anymore, which is kind of interesting. I always thought of Svech as his goal first guy, but I don't know if that's necessarily true anymore with Svech. But, with all his shooting and such a great shooter that he is, that shot pace will kind of depend on the minutes. I think if he were given top line minutes, he'd explode. I think we'd easily see as easily as you get, I guess, easily see like a 90-point pace out of the guy potentially. But as long as he's on that second line, I feel like he is kind of capped at that 75, I guess, to point per game pace in a way, which isn't terrible at that point. But then again, you're also seeing a kind of a lower floor.
Just remember, like, I don't know, like to me, like I'm not buying these lines. So it's like, I know some lines we're talking about, like we're saying like, oh, like when we talked about like Colorado, I was like, oh, maybe Burakovsky does stick on the top line, but like this one just seems like, come on, I just don't buy it. So we'll see.
Tell me something. I'm curious before we move on from Carolina, because we can talk about Svech for 3 hours, but where is Svech going in your couple drafts versus Stamkos?
That's a higher. Funny question, because Stamkos, his ADP is 21.3, and Svechnikov is also 21.3. They're going like back to back.
Stamkos is an easy winner in that one to me.
Yeah,
it's not even close.
Yeah, and that speaks to what you were saying, right? His floor is higher, his ceiling's higher. I don't know why Stamkos has been drafted as early as 11th overall, which is 6 spaces ahead of the earliest Svechnikov.
That'd be where we'd take him. Probably.
Yeah,
the concern with Stamkos
he's a legit
would be,
first rounder.
The concern with him would be the injury, right? And like, is he fully healthy? And maybe some people were also worried right when our draft started. That was when Kucherov injury news came out, and some people like got a little gun shy. I'm not too worried about Stamkos because of Kucherov, but the health does concern me a little bit.
I think that the Kucherov injury is good for him. I think he becomes the trigger man even more than he was.
Yeah, makes sense.
I don't know. I could be wrong, but anyway, that's not even. We're way off topic.
Well, we could go to Tampa Bay.
We could go to Tampa Bay. You know what? Let's go to Tampa Bay. Who cares about order?
Let's just
why not? Let's just go. You know what? I started out of order, so now we're staying out of order. You guys, I've screwed everything, and we're going to stick with it. So here are the lines for the Tampa Bay Lightning right now. We've got Palat. This was January 6th. Palat, Point, and Stamkos. And then Boulay, Barre. I don't know how to say that. Colton and Johnson. And then you've got Smith, a bunch of names I can't pronounce. But there's the other guys don't matter, so don't worry about it. But the top two lines are what matter the most. So you've got Palat, Point, and Stamkos. What about Palat? Because I think that's the one everyone's going to ask about. We know about Point. We know about Stammer. What about Palat?
I mean, I'm not going to let Palat go undrafted in any of my drafts. So like if he's like still around and it's like the last round, he's like an obvious, because just the upside, like he already in the playoffs last year was getting on the top power play and getting good deployment, and he like kind of capitalized. Like he was really valuable in playoff pools. He had 18 points in 25 games. That's a 60-point pace, and now he's like even more assured to hold a top power play spot and like a top line with Point and Kucherov. Like it's probably some of the best deployment in the league. Like this again reminds me of like our Burakovsky conversation, like similar. And like, I feel like Palat is someone who has a lot of upside and not as much floor as usual, because there's fewer people that could bounce him off of the top power play since Kucherov's out of the picture.
Yeah.
And he hits too, which is nice. I mean, he doesn't shoot very much, but he does hit.
Yeah, so like in a bangers league, or as you guys say, bango league, he'll definitely help you there. He also does like okay for blocking shots as a forward too. Should you care? Like a block a game last season is pretty good as far as a forward goes.
It's not gonna. It's really.
Yeah. And then like, yeah, just this power play potential is really exciting for him because he's this really super steady 50-point producer from the second power play unit. His power play totals the last 3 years have been like he's averaged about 10 points over an 82 game pace. So now, I feel like you just pop 10 onto that and suddenly you've got a 60-point Palat, maybe disguised still in your draft as a 50 to 55 point guy, especially with those hits, can be super valuable.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of impressive that he got 8 power play points last season with only about a minute on the power play per game. Average power play time on ice about a minute-ish. Still got 8 power play points, 25% of the team's power play. Like that's pretty dang good still. And now he's going to that top power play. He's going to play below the goal line. So I guess this was tweeted out yesterday, but it seems that the top unit right now is Point on the right circle, Hedman up top, Stamkos on the left circle. Makes sense. Johnson in the slot and Palat below the goal line. Could be really interesting.
Johnson is interesting if he's able to keep that. I can't imagine actually wanting to have him because I can't imagine he keeps it. But in the slot on a team like that, like they need somebody there. It's not gonna be Kucherov hanging out in power play one anymore. But
his 5-on-5 play brings him down.
I mean, he's playing. I imagine he's playing on the second line. We saw some other second lines which involved. I think it was Killorn on the left, Cirelli in the middle, Johnson on the right.
Yeah.
I see Johnson and Coleman probably flip flopping occasionally.
Yeah.
Tyler Johnson's probably one of the people that I've added and dropped the most in my fantasy career.
Oh my gosh.
He's just
I feel like a lot of us have that sentiment of he's doing well. He's gone completely. He
and Palat
and Killorn
too.
All these Tampa guys and Yanni Gourde and Cedric Paquette once upon a time and Matthew Joseph. I can name 7 random Tampa guys who are just they're playing on the top line. I better grab them. This year though, there's really just that one place to be. So we'll see if Palat can hold it the whole way through.
I think he will.
Unless he gets injured.
Yeah.
I agree.
Here's a hot take. Or a hot question, because I don't know if I'm going to make the take, but what do you think? Why isn't Sergachev on that top unit? Why put Palat and Johnson there and not just I get the way they're positioned. You've got Stamkos to take the big shot from the left circle. You've got Hedman up top. So maybe you don't need Sergachev there, but I wonder if they could work him in somehow.
Well, I think if they did, it would mean they would need to restructure their power play deployment. The fact they even have Palat behind the goal line means they're really utilizing their players at the dots. So I'm not quite sure where Sergachev winds up. Although we did see a few games where they tried Sergachev above Hedman in the playoffs on the power play. Not very often, but I wouldn't be surprised if they try that here and there as well this season. But I feel like Sergachev is still, and I was going to ask you guys what you thought about Sergachev this season, but my opinion is I think Sergachev is probably still a year or so away from them really wanting to start swapping him into that role full time. But he might see more opportunities, especially if Tampa starts to run away with the division, and then why not, right?
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh no, I was gonna say he's still only 22, so there's a lot of room for him to grow. Hedman's 30, so that's the age balance we're all sort of watching. Yep. But yeah, I don't know that this is the year. But we always say that, and then he always supplants Hedman for no conceivable reasons.
All of a sudden.
Yeah. Elon, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say it doesn't matter almost but obviously things could change, but there's been times where we've, pulled our hair out on the podcast and been like, oh no, it's Sergachev on the top power play. And I haven't. Then you look at the box score and every game it's Sergachev getting, maybe a half point per game and Hedman just piling up the points. It almost just seems like this deployment, normally in fantasy, we care about deployment and that is a good way for us to predict what will happen. But it seems like with these Tampa defensemen, it's just Sergachev's maybe going to get you 40 to 45 point pace and Hedman's going to have a 60 plus point pace and it almost doesn't matter. So we'll see. But obviously, like you said, Sergachev is very young, so he still has room to grow.
Yeah, that's kind of the same thing as me. But this year, I think it's too early. I think it might be a year or two out until he's truly, fantasy relevant.
Not to talk about the playoffs too much because I know that, whatever. But Hedman's playoff performance was the best Hedman I think we've ever seen, and he's 30. Yeah. So he's still got a good amount of time left, I think. And I think he's going to have a great season just on his own right.
And defensemen do age a little bit later, or tend to have a little bit more.
Tell that to Kale McCarr and Quinn Hughes turning.
I know, right? Around. Jeez, Man,
I mean,
it
I
used
feel
to be
like
that the
this-
defenseman didn't, but
Yeah, I feel like for like a defensive defenseman, that's still true. But I feel like, well, I mean, obviously we just have this recency bias because we
Brent
saw
Burns is
Hughes-
staring at you as you're about to say what you're about to say.
Well, no, he's still, he has been and will always be great. Like all hail Brent Burns. But in the meantime, like we used to say, we needed to wait so long for an NHL defenseman to like really mature, and I guess that's just been challenged with Hughes and McCarr.
I mean,
And I'm trying to think of who's next in line to really
Well,
challenge that thinking.
don't even go so far. Chabot, you got
Theodore?
Darlene, who did great, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Darlene
You know, like,
too.
we've had great young defensemen come in and just do incredible. Speaking of it, someone who came in really young, let's move over to Florida, because there were some really interesting things happen today on the power play. And just in general, there's some interesting things that are happening. So at 5-on-5, there's one person that's obviously extremely interesting, and that's Duclair, who continues to practice. And Quenneville went as far to say that Duclair will start with Barkov at Huberdeau. So Duclair is obviously the first one to talk about. Now, the second thing that's extremely interesting is it seems that perhaps Yandel's been bumped off the top power play. So today's power play was Barkov, Huberdeau, Duclair, Wenberg, and Ekblad. So does that all of a sudden, us Fantasy Hockey Podcast has always been firm Ekblad is boring camp. We've always been in that side. He is a vanilla player. It is the truth. But now is he not? Does he become more interesting?
One thing to add to this wasn't like a group deployment type thing. Coach Q said he liked Ekblad in power play 1.
Yes.
So it's not just like a random one-off. It's like a consideration, whether they go that way or not.
Yeah, and we seem to be pretty familiar now with Quenneville's disdain for Keith Yandel, the way he was treated and benched and taken off the top unit last season. And I mean, the timing couldn't be better for Ekblad, because last season, out of nowhere, all of a sudden he put up a 50-point pace when he'd never even quite hit a 40-point pace in his career so far. And it wasn't with power play time. It wasn't with a shooting percentage. He actually had the lowest shooting percentage of his career, fewest power play points of his career. So it's like, where is this coming from? It's coming from assists. Like, I don't know what Joel Quenneville taught Ekblad, but Ekblad led the league last season in primary assists per 60 minutes at 5-on-5. Like, he was an animal, and his rate there was twice what it's ever been in his career before. And like, I've dug through Ekblad, I'm like, what was happening? And I think honestly, Quenneville had a system where I still don't know, but the system that Quenneville built really worked for Ekblad to be like one of the most frequent shot assisters, and those shots turned into goals often enough. One reason to think that he might not hit 50 points again is that his on-ice shooting percentage was above 10%, which is generally unsustainable. But then again, if you play with Barkov and Huberdeau, I'm not going to rule it out. And also, you put in those power play points if he does end up in that top deployment, and there you go. You've got like 55s. I'm actually like talking myself into Ekblad so much, and most of my drafts are over. I'm mad I didn't go for him in any leagues.
The thing is, like, this is not only just, okay, he'll get some power play time. Like, this Florida top power play, like Keith Yandel has been among the top of the league in power play points over the past few seasons. So if all of a sudden Ekblad gets to get in there, and yeah, Hoffman isn't there and Dadonov isn't there, like we're talking about like Wenberg and Duclair as two of the forwards in that power play. So not maybe as scary as it used to be, but still, if he was able to put up a 50-point pace last year with hardly any power play points, like Brian said, like maybe take off a few, maybe he like, you know, whatever, some luck involved, but you know, put him as a 40-point even strength guy, then you still add 20 power play point pace, and all of a sudden we're looking at a 60-point pace defenseman, which is huge. So he's definitely not boring to me. I love this. I was assuming that we're gonna have to wait for Yandel to get injured before Ekblad to ever break out,
which never happens.
Which never happens,
ever.
right? That was like a hell for freezing over kind of thing. But now all of a sudden, like I think Ekblad, if you haven't drafted yet, bump him way up your draft list, because this is very exciting.
Also, to clarify, like, because you guys called him a vanilla player, and like I totally agree. I have been completely in step with you guys in saying like for years it's like, oh, Ekblad, like, you know, high-end draft pick, he's just gonna step up and be an offensive wizard. It's like, no, that wasn't gonna happen. But now
now we've got to pay attention. It's kind of,
but of
really
course, with the caveat that these are preseason practice lines.
For sure.
Everyone's gonna say that after every single line combo that we
if we get too crazy.
I will say the most exciting thing, I mean, I actually think this Ekblad change is potentially very exciting, but I think Duclair makes a lot of sense, especially late, because he's still not being drafted especially high. He likes to shoot. And the thing that Florida lost, the biggest piece they lost, was a power play shooter.
Yeah.
So if they can find that in Duclair, that's great for him and great for you if you draft him late and he, low risk play there.
Like top line, top power play with Barkov and Huberdeau.
Why
like
not,
you're not gonna hear me complaining about that pick.
Draft him in the 14th round. Come on. Maybe earlier now if people are paying attention, but
potentially
not much earlier still, because the floor is clearly low.
Yeah. I mean, he is on the top power play too, which is great. So let's move over to the Nashville Predators now, where honestly, everything is pretty much status quo, except for the fact that Boryatsky is now on the team and they will hit a little bit more. But aside from that, the lines are honestly extremely similar. That top line is Philip Forsberg, Johansson, and Arvidsson. Yeah, you've kind of got the same thing going on in Nashville. And quite frankly, I don't really like a lot of it. I think, Arvidsson is one guy that to me has fallen a lot. Do you guys believe in an Arvidsson bounce back?
I mean, like, he had success on a line with Forsberg and Johansson. So it's like, it seems like the recipe should be there. It's the exact same players. But at the same time, no, I guess so. A little bit of a bounce back. Like, obviously not like back to being like 35 plus goals, but I think that probably he should be getting drafted a little bit higher than he has been. I don't think he's like a 30-point guy like he was showing us last year. To me, like Matt Duchene becomes like very concerning looking at these lines, by the way, playing with Turris and Granlund, like snoozer right there.
Yeah,
I'm honestly surprised he's still being drafted.
Yeah, we keep getting questions about Duchene.
In standard leagues anyway.
And so, yeah, I don't see the love for Duchene. I don't see it really working out for him or being good. So right now, the line I think that you're looking at, Elon, is a little bit old. I think that's from the playoffs. But right now they have Granlund, Duchene, and Kunin. It doesn't get better though. So
did I say Turris?
It's still Turris. It still doesn't get any better there. Honestly, Granlund, Duchene, and Kunin is still not great.
Turris is on the Oilers now. So would you take? This is maybe an easy question then. I think I would take Arvidsson ahead of Duchene. Do you concur?
Oh yeah, all day. I'm taking, especially with the kind of. I don't know about you guys in your drafts, but so far we found the right wing to be pretty shallow this year and kind of really difficult to fill that right wing slot. And Arvidsson is one guy that just from a shots perspective alone, or upside in shots at least, like is someone that excites me quite a bit.
It is funny that you mentioned that. I feel like in the drafts I've been doing, I always wind up with straight jokers on my right wing. Like I'm like, what? Yeah. Like the rest of my draft is great. And then over here,
it's like, what have I done? How did I get here?
Right wing is that one position this year that everyone is finding themselves suddenly unequipped to fill. Yeah. So if you haven't done your draft yet, like I never actually like usually rosters are flexible enough that you don't need to really cover yourself beyond making sure you've got like two good serviceable players. But if you are concerned about position scarcity, I've seen right wings falling off faster, honestly, than even defensemen in my drafts this year.
Yeah,
and Arvidsson is someone I'd take another chance on. Yeah. So the thing with Nashville is their power play sucked again last year. Like only Roman Josi ever got points on it, which is just a head scratcher. And if you look at the way they deployed their forwards, 3 forwards saw more than 13 minutes at 5-on-5 a night. One was the most often played one was Mikael Granlund, who they seem to hate, but they played him the most, followed by Duchene. Forsberg just barely above 13 minutes a night. And I've made the case that Forsberg with like Mitch Marner minutes would put up maybe not quite Mitch Marner production, but like easily 75 points, but he's really stuck because he only sees 13 minutes a night. Victor Arvidsson actually lost 90 seconds a night last season at 5-on-5. And I say all this not because I have an explanation for it. It just doesn't make sense. So I don't know if they go back to like, what's that?
I honestly, I said this on our own podcast. I think Arvidsson played all of last season hurt. I really do.
That seems to bear out in the fact that like he stopped shooting as much as like as not completely, but like he definitely shot maybe like 20% less with no apparent reason.
Yeah.
So that makes
I'm
sense.
still not like I'm taking. I think the late round risk being as low as it is on Arvidsson, I think the upside is there. I assume at least the shots will come back. If they don't come back, if the shots don't come back, that's when I really get worried.
Yeah.
If he starts shooting like he was a couple seasons ago, then I mean, the goal should be there eventually, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if they'll ever figure the power play out. I still think that Yossi is going to lead the team in points.
Yeah.
But I don't know. That's not, I would say it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is.
Okay, another ranking question for you. Duclair or Arvidsson? Who do you take first?
Duclair.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Duclair. Yeah.
I mean,
my take, at
what's
least.
your answer?
I don't know. I'd probably go Arvidsson. Just
I feel like I would also take Arvidsson. I just want to be the first to say it. I wanted you to be.
Well,
I'm just afraid that Duclair loses his spot.
Well, yeah, exactly. I think it depends where in the draft. If we're talking like my last pick, that is someone I'm streaming anyways, maybe I'll take Duclair for the upside. But
that's why I'm thinking about it. Yeah.
If it's someone that like I want to hold all season, then Arvidsson's likely sticking with Forsberg and Johansson.
Yeah. It's kind of been our
Duclair's ceiling is higher, but Arvidsson's probably more likely. But when I'm that deep, I'm probably just looking for the ceiling. Like if I have to drop a Duclair, I don't care. If I have to drop Arvidsson, probably I don't care unless I'm in a really deep draft.
At the point where we've had to decide.
Like we wouldn't have thought at all that we'd say that 2 years ago, right? When he was just like up and coming. Like 2 seasons ago, 68-point pace, 34 goals in 58 games.
Exciting.
Gosh.
And everything just collapsed.
I have because you guys mentioned Borowiecki. So I floated this theory that he's not gonna be as good for hits this year because Nashville might have the puck more often than Ottawa did. And also maybe they play a system where like it's just not that valued for him to go around like hitting everything that moves. So like when he used to be the guy who could win you your week in that category, I'm curious to see if he'll still have that opportunity to hit as much.
Worried about it.
Yeah, I'm definitely worried. I've stayed away from Borowiecki as like, I've seen so many people draft for hits. If I'm drafting for hits this season, I'm going like a Ryan Reeves or I'm kind of staying away from Borowiecki just because, like you said, I think there's a lot of uncertainty into how his deployment will work. And on top of that, like, will he be able to hit as much? Will the system allow him to hit as much? I don't know if the answer is there. And so I'm not drafting him for that because there's other options that, quite frankly, are much more stable than Borowiecki, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's move over now to the Dallas Stars. A little bit of weirdness there, but the Dallas Stars are weird in that no one's really that relevant. They're like the Arizona Coyotes. We talked about this on the Keeping Karlsson side of the show, but like a lot like the Arizona Coyotes. And, for people who have listened to the podcast, that we kind of say this about the Stars all the time, but their system just doesn't let people score goals. They don't like scoring goals, actually. Mm-hmm. They like playing defense, scoring one goal, sitting back and boring us all to death. If you watch soccer, you know that to me, the Dallas Stars remind me a lot of Jose Mourinho over at Tottenham and Chelsea and everywhere else he's been. Scores a goal and just sits back for 90 minutes and lets the team come at them. Anyways, that being said, the highest drafted player right now on the Dallas Stars is Jamie Benn at what's his ADP? Brandon, do you remember?
It's down there. It's like 100 something.
It's like 100 something, which is insane that's the first time one of their forwards are going. So right now their lines are Ben, Hintz, and Gurianov. Their second line is Kiviranta, Pavelski, and Radulov.
I mean, I'm shocked that Kiviranta got that shot, so that's good for him if he hangs there. Not like shocked enough to draft him.
No way he's hanging there.
Yeah.
Maybe he will. I don't know, but like I wouldn't want to draft him. I think, to be honest, the forwards are really boring, like you said.
Yes,
like maybe we can talk about, is Radulov going to bounce back? Is Pavelski going to bounce back? I don't know. I think the interesting thing to me is actually John Klingberg is on the top power play last time I saw, and not Miro Heiskanen, and that's with Radulov, Pavelski, Ben, and Robertson, who's also like an interesting guy, Jason Robertson. So I feel like Klingberg's fallen like super deep in a lot of my drafts, and like Heiskanen like way above him. And I'm not saying that like Klingberg's going to be better than Heiskanen. I could see it being pretty even, just like in a lot of playoff pools last year. But like Klingberg might be one of those really good, like you wait a while and still get a top power play defenseman. Like it used to be a lot more exciting to have the top power play defenseman on Dallas, but still this is a guy who, I have time for, especially if he's falling super deep. And the defensemen, that are also around are like a Matt Dumba or whatever, then you could also get a John Klingberg.
They did split largely on the power play last year. So that's one thing I'm worried about, is that Klingberg might be there now, but if he starts to kind of falter a little bit, it's really easy for them to just swap Heiskanen in, right? And so, I mean, we've seen Klingberg go last round in our listener leagues. He's gone last round, undrafted.
He's gone undrafted.
Just wild. I mean, it's crazy to me.
We are doing full bangers cats leagues. So if Klingberg's not going to get points, he is way below replacement. Yeah, so there is that. I mean, Yandel goes very late in those leagues as well.
And I mean, I'd bring up Hintz and Gurianov, but the thing with Hintz and Gurianov is they're on second power play. So I feel like their ceiling is already capped 5-on-5 because Stars don't do much there. And then they're also second power play. So I mean, do we need to talk about Hinson Gurianov? I don't really think so.
I'm good to move
We're not
on.
drafting.
I'm like,
Okay, let's.
Dallas makes me sleepy. I'm gonna
They
be
make me-
honest. Like, I drafted Pavelski with the last pick overall in a draft because I got sniped on Dylan Strome in a league that I thought nobody would even know who he is.
Oh.
So shame on me. Yeah, like what all this to say, I drafted Pavelski and like I immediately regretted it. It's like someone needs to score goals, except like you guys said, it's Dallas. No one needs to score
Pavelski's
goals.
shooting percentage just dropped. Like I remember last year, we had for 3/4 of the season, everyone was asking us, "Is Pavelski going to turn it around?" And the whole season, I had to be like, "No, this is who he is. He's shooting at 11%. It's not bad. This is just like you're seeing who Joe Pavelski is when he's not on the Sharks." Like,
Yeah,
I don't know what to tell you. It's sad. It sucks, but yeah.
his ice time dipped, and that was that. But look, I will say, okay, one Dallas Stars take, which we dropped on our last regular episode of the show, was our Schmore Goalies board, where we went through every single goalie and tried our best. I know it's impossible. We tried our best to project how the goalies will do next year and broke them into tiers. I think like Jake Ettinger is a really interesting guy right at the end of a draft, just because Hudobin has never been a full-time starter in the league. And I don't see, like, if Dallas has had so much success running a tandem, and obviously you could just say, oh, it's because they had Bishop and Hudobin, two great goalies. But I think it might just be that Hudobin's really awesome when he plays like 50% of the games. And so I think I could see them trying out Jake Ettinger, and maybe he can be similar to what Bishop's been doing, just because it's like a great system. Like, I'm not saying that Ettinger's like right now as like a prospect, like better than Ben Bishop. Like, I'm not crazy, but I do see that as a really great system. And if you're going to get a goalie that's playing a decent number of games, that's a guy to watch. Like him and Klingberg are the guys I'm looking at really late in my draft, if I'm thinking about Dallas at all.
Yeah, Ettinger is interesting. I think it's a system thing. I do agree with that. I think that Dallas has a system that allows goalies to flourish. I would love to see that tested with Ettinger, but I do believe that that is the case as well, that there is a system there that would allow him to do well. Now, I'm sorry, Brian, that you're sleepy, because you know who the last team in the Central is, and it's going to make you sleepier, maybe, then that's the Detroit Red Wings.
Well, Chicago.
No, I'm wide awake for this.
There's two teams left. We have Chicago as well.
Oh, okay, fine. We'll talk about Chicago a little bit. But there's one person. Okay, so on you like Kubalik more than anybody else on the planet, I think. But
I'll see your Kubalik and raise you Pius Suter for Chicago hype train in this episode.
Oh my gosh. Okay, we're skipping Chicago then. I can't hear this blasphemy. Let's staying on Detroit here. So the lines here are Zadina, Fabry, and Ryan on the second. I skipped the top line. The top line is Bertuzzi, Larkin, and Mantha. Makes total sense. And honestly, aside from those two lines, there's really not much else. And then Philip Hronek is the only interesting defenseman, really. Maybe Cholowski if he gets that top power play. I would expect Hronek to get it. But I think really the thing to talk about here is obviously Mantha being a sleeper, I think.
Yeah.
That's an obvious one. Larkin, I think, is largely a sleeper as well. There can be a discussion on Tyler Bertuzzi, but Brandon might kill me if I initiate that because he knows I kind of like Tyler Bertuzzi.
May I?
Yes, please.
I'll say a small thing about Bertuzzi. Like, his numbers last year weren't as high as like a lot of people were hoping for, being on the top line. I think a big thing to remember is Mantha being hurt. Like, this is not a deep team, right? Mantha being hurt killed like Larkin a little bit and like really killed Tyler Bertuzzi. And I just feel like if they could have a full healthy season as the top line, and like Bertuzzi's there on the top line and top power play with Larkin and Mantha, I feel like Bertuzzi becomes more than just a replacement guy. I think he could be like a bit better. I'm not saying he's going to like have a huge breakup, but I could see him being like a 55-ish, maybe approaching 60-point guy if things all break right. But that does require Mantha to stay healthy for a year, which I'd love to see because he seems like he's so good. He just has gotten hurt the last couple seasons.
Butt goals. There could be some butt goals from Tyler Bertuzzi. There you go. If you have to listen to the Keeping Karlsson side of the podcast, we talk about butt goals. It's
in the home of
Thomas
Holmstrom, one of the originators of the modern butt goal.
Yes, the modern. We should do a whole episode one day. Come together in the off season, talk about the history of the butt goal and that position. There's nothing really, I think, on the second line either. Bobby Ryan, Philip Zadina. Zadina is the only one that could maybe be interesting, but I don't see why he'd go to that top line personally. I think Bertuzzi fills a role.
Yeah.
Am I wrong there, I think.
No, I think so. Unless, like, we saw Detroit try all kinds of things in the time that Mantha was healthy. At least, like, you know, Mantha was separated from Larkin. Bertuzzi was separated from Larkin. Zadina did get time with, last year he played the most, oddly, with two different centermen. I guess he just didn't have a constant wing, but he played the most with Phil Pula and Dylan Larkin. Was playing with Larkin and Bertuzzi before he got injured, after Mantha got injured, when like whose spot he had taken. But Zadina looked really good when he did get that a little bit of sunlight in his deployment. 6 points in 9 games. He had a nice little run there before he got injured and his season ended. I took him as my very last pick, like 251st overall. And I don't feel bad about it. Like, he'll be a quick drop. I agree with you guys. Like, there isn't a whole lot of room for opportunity, but I don't think Bertuzzi or Mantha are necessarily locked in next to Larkin. And so I think that could give Zadina some opportunity. Plus, who else is going to be the fourth forward on that power play?
Yeah, that is true.
That's a good point.
I mean, there's something there, especially in a points league. I think as a late round flyer, I don't hate the idea of the upside there in Zadina, and I think especially with how much. Yeah. I mean, that's, like I said, towards the very end as a flyer on someone that you could possibly drop. Like, yeah, it makes sense.
Maybe like Zadina is the kind of guy also, just like if Mantha gets hurt yet again, then you're jumping on Zadina right away.
Exactly. He's the guy who would fill in pretty much immediately. He is like Mantha light, I feel like, without the shots and such, but with the type of shot that Mantha would provide. Okay, now we can go to Chicago, who I unfortunately kind of forgot about for a second here. So the lines in Chicago right now pretty much seem to be, so let me pull it up on Daily Faceoff, because it seems like the actual, I mean, the top line is going to be Dylan Strome, Patrick Kane, and Alex DeBrincat.
Probably DeBrincat?
DeBrincat is what it seems like at this point.
Doesn't have to be, but most likely.
It doesn't have to be. If it were Brandon's way, it wouldn't be DeBrincat. It would be Kubalik.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I would have figured Kubalik would slide in on this.
You think?
Yeah.
He has to get top power play, I would think.
Yeah.
Who else is going there?
Kubalik? Yeah, Kubalik right now is slated on the top power play with Dylan Strome, Patrick Kane, DeBrincat, and Duncan Keith. So that's
Dylan Strome is clearly the benefactor here of
100%.
Whatever is happening.
My issue with Strome is just, so Strome, I like him in a points league, not as much in a Cats league, especially Bangers league, because I mean, he doesn't really do anything except get points is what it seems like so thus far. So that's my take on Dylan Strome. I want to hear the take on Pius Suter, because I haven't even given him like a second of thought, to be honest.
Well, he was great in Europe, right? He's put up great numbers even this season. Now, all of a sudden, with Jonathan Taves injured, he's centering the second line with Kubalik. Like, I just feel like he's getting this great opportunity. Again, this is like where we're considering to draft Zadina. I would also consider a Pius Suter. But I will say, one thing I do want to say is I've been poo-pooing DeBrincat all summer long, being like, he's he's a really great talent and he could be awesome. He had that amazing second season, but like he's been pushed off the top power play because Doc got a spot on there, and like, Jonathan Taves has a spot. All of a sudden, forget everything I said, because now DeBrincat is going to get the opportunity that he wasn't seeing last year just because of these unfortunate injuries. So all of a sudden now, if we're having like DeBrincat playing with Patrick Kane at even strength and also on the power play, he's like the guy where like Dylan Strome is like, sure, that'll be nice, but I'm not expecting like I think like DeBrincat can have like a huge breakout, go back to like what he did in his first season, like getting like 75 plus points if he's sticking with Patrick Kane all season on, even strength and the power play.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the other one that's going to be interesting when he comes back is Kirby Dach.
Yeah, when. But yeah.
When.
Right. Feel like the last I saw was that like he's done for the season.
Is he done for the season?
That's what I thought I saw.
I mean, it looked brutal, but like, yeah, it didn't look good, but I just didn't know if it was okay. It sounds bad. Never mind. Ignore my Kirby Dach take. Well, so I agree with DeBrincat. I think before you go for 10 minutes on Kubalik, give me a second.
I'm just gonna say the word Duncan Keith.
Oh, okay. You know what? Actually, we've talked about it. Go to Duncan Keith.
I mean,
are we just gonna let it sit
care
there?
At all about Duncan Keith?
No. Well, a little.
I'll care a little, because I don't know that Adam Boqvist is ready to quarterback a top unit, especially when there's like going to be a lot of heavy lifting to do. I feel like Duncan Keith, just as like the elder statesman, is there for at least the start of the season. I could see a transition happening at some point, but remember how many different people Chicago tried on the in that PP1 QB spot all season long, and then Duncan Keith was the only one who actually did anything with it. So I think it's going to be Boqvist before long. I just don't know that this year yet. And like this goes back to talking about young defensemen. Like he seems like a young defenseman. Like he doesn't seem like a Dahlin or Makar or Hughes who's ready to just go nuts right away. Needs some time to grow. So like Boqvist is like another late round flyer, which I feel like Chicago is full of this year.
Seems like it.
That's where I'm at on him.
Yeah, I just feel like with Boqvist, like he did get a shot on the top power play last year also. So I just think like this is going to be the kind of thing that probably swaps around a bit, which decreases my interest in Duncan Keith because he's not someone to hold. But like if he's there at the start of the season, I'll like ride him. And if he's doing something, I'll hold on. But I would drop him. And I am expecting Boqvist to get some shots on the top power play this year. It's just a matter of when he gets those shots, is he going to do something to capitalize and hold it?
Yep. That's pretty much my take on it.
I do like Duncan Keith versus the outlook on him, I guess.
Yeah.
Like compared to public opinion, I think he's better than public opinion for this, at least the beginning of the season.
It's true.
You know, he's going to have power play exposure to Patrick Kane, like full stop, right? Like there's something there.
I'll be honest, I haven't even thought of him until you mentioned him right now. So I think that proves the point that now I'm like, oh yeah, is he even on my like spreadsheets as one of the ranked defensemen
too?
Yeah.
I mean, whatever. He's nothing special, but like I wouldn't, if he's filling in my fourth defenseman position, like, or fifth or even whatever.
Yeah.
You could do worse.
If he's like your first bench guy, I think that's where Duncan Keith probably fits in. Like he's also old. So I'm worried. He's played a lot of games. Like he's barely missed time in most of the last, 7, 8, like actually ever really. He missed a handful of games last season, but aside from that, and one other season, 15-16, he's been like just on the ice almost all the time. But this is his age 37 season, and he's not a guy who seems to have aged so gracefully. Like it seems like he still can eat big minutes, but he can't quite do the same things offensively that he once could, like unlike someone like Mark Giordano. So yeah, so I'm a little like, I'm wary, but I would definitely draft him as a power play quarterback option very late in my draft.
I mean, you start seeing the guys that are near him that deep, and there's nobody else that gets really any realistic power play exposure that deep. There's nobody.
Yeah.
Even in Cats leagues, it's like a wasteland.
I'm trying to see.
Connor Murphy, Cats league. People forgetting about him.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I did like him last year a lot. He was pretty good. Okay, so that's enough of Chicago. Let's go over to the Eastern Division, the Mass Mutual NHL East Division.
Finally.
By the way, the Mass Mutual.
We need to start over. We need to re-record every division.
We just did the Discover NHL Central Division. We get none of the money from the sponsor, so I'm not saying that ever again. Oops, almost moved my mic. So let's start off in Boston, where honestly, it's actually kind of easy, I feel like, to talk about. Just a little. I think the defense is the most interesting thing to talk about, obviously, with some of the changes that are happening there. The top line is, I don't know if I'm that excited about Studnicka. It's Marchand, Bergeron, and Studnicka. I don't know exactly how to say it, but that top line, I'm not that interested. And then we've got a second line of DeBrusk, Krejci, and Kasha.
Yeah, I'll yield my time. I'll yield my time and let Brian just talk about how much he loves Andre Kasha for the rest of the podcast.
Okay. Interesting. I haven't thought about it for a second.
I love Andre Kasha. I mean, okay. I once upon a time loved Andre Kasha when he was just like he looked the same way that Vrana looked, that Bjorkstrand looked. I'm trying to think of another name, but like these guys. Timo Meier, Victor Arvidsson, like Andre Kasha had that same profile, except the difference between him and them is he got injured a whole bunch of times between, him coming up and then him getting an opportunity, which still has not really ever happened because these injuries have interrupted those opportunities. He's been a huge shot volume guy, came into the league in his second year in the season, was taking almost 3 shots a night. Took more than 3 shots a night the next season. So and that's just been a theme for him since. I was really disappointed when he went to Boston and his ice time dropped and they didn't use him. And now I just feel like, hey, he's from the same country as David Pasternak and Pasternak's injured. So he should just take Pasternak's spot. It's just that easy. And he's a big shooter like Pasternak is. I mean, I don't know how many other real parallels I can draw between their games other than how often they shoot the puck and their country of origin. But I still have faith that if given the opportunity, Kasha might turn it into something. He was a very late pick for me in one of my drafts. And I'm very ready to drop him. I'm not overly committed to him, but I don't know who this Studnicka guy is. I'm going to be honest. So I really don't know like how to stake out the competition here. I just think that there's a decent shot that Kase gets a shot to be on the top line and or the top power play to start the season, and might actually be able to do something with it if he is entirely healthy and can stay that way.
So first of all, I totally disagree. And second of all, I think you missed out on the perfect joke, because when you were saying what are things that they have in common, Kase and Pastrnak, you left with the fact that both of their names sound like foods.
Food. Yeah.
Come on.
And with Studnicka, he's a stud. Come on.
It's easy.
It's easy.
Yeah.
It's easy.
Can I do one brag on Boston? I called it like as soon as the news came out about how Pasternak's having surgery, and this is like recorded on our podcast, this is like in the ether for everyone. I said, I'll bet you he's going to come back faster than his timeline is, because he's just a beast. Like, I had my reasons, but it's like Pasternak, because he's been injured before and has beaten the timelines. And I feel like there's something about these like elite players. Like I think McDavid's beaten a timeline, like the superstars, unless like the doctors are saying it's not going to happen, like obviously with Kucherov right now, like he's had this surgery and whatever, but like, I just felt like Pasternak's probably going to beat it. And now the news just came out earlier this week that Pasternak's potentially ahead of schedule. So now we're looking at maybe beginning of February, which might only be a couple of weeks, which means anyone who's gotten him in like the second round of a fantasy league
as third.
And this we're talking about a guy who's like probably top 5 in most formats. And you got him as such a steal really deep.
Just insane. I mean, I think Pasta is one of the biggest sleepers of the season.
Probably. Yeah, I mean,
so
it was weird that his ADP was in the 30s when even knowing that his slated timeline was mid-February. Like, who cares? You lose a month from one of the best players you can possibly get, you'll live, hopefully.
Right, just survive those first 3 weeks.
We have
to talk about Charlie McAvoy and Grzelcyk though.
Oh, that's what. Yes, that is the point of contention here that we must talk about is what's going on with Grzelcyk and McAvoy, and what are you doing?
So I'll go first, I guess. Like, I really cannot foresee Grzelcyk holding power play 1 all season. Like, I guess it's possible. And like, obviously he's getting the first crack there. That's what everyone said. And like, I think they're going to give it the old college try, but like, I think Charlie McAvoy should get a shot at some point. Like, obviously if the power play like just takes off and is awesome all year, then great. And Grzelcyk becomes like a great stud. And he's another guy I'm not letting go undrafted, right? Because that upside is there, but I'm also not reaching for him. Like, I think I've seen in some drafts him going like super high. And this is a guy, like, one tweet saying like, oh, Charlie McAvoy's been practicing on the top power play today, and all of a sudden Grzelcyk goes to having like 0 fantasy value. Like, before even playing a game, it's like his value goes to 0. So it's like, I'm not super excited about him, aside from someone if I can get him in the last pick or like stream him in. But I think McAvoy then becomes also like a really good value pick, because I think there is first of all, he's great at even strength anyways. So he gives you value even if he never gets on that top power play. But if he does, we're talking about another Ekblad situation, right? Where like he's already been so good at even strength. Now, what does he do if he's quarterbacking this amazing Boston top power play? And we just saw that Ekblad got his shot, and I wouldn't be surprised to see McAvoy also get his shot.
Yeah,
I legitimately could see. I said this on our podcast. If McAvoy plays the entire season on top power play, which is still possible, I don't know. It seems like they're probably going to start with Grzelcyk as they have before. But if McAvoy played the entire season on the top power play in Banger Cats leagues, I think that McAvoy could be a top 5 defenseman this season for fantasy.
Nice.
Like, PIMS hits, the shots would come up because of more time on ice, if anything. And that power play is so deadly, it probably doesn't really matter too much who's behind it. Like, just pass it to anybody in front of you and the puck's likely to go in.
Yeah, I agree with you. Not to take anything away from Torrey Krug, because as you guys mentioned on our half of the episode, like I think he's a top end power play quarterback, and he's never quite gotten the respect he deserves just because of all the guys who are on the power play with him, and they're just so dominant. And so how much can he really do? But now I guess we're going to see just how valuable he is. And I don't know that Matt Grzelcyk can replace him. Charlie, like, I like what you said that he could be a top 5 guy for bangers and hits. I just want him to start shooting more. Yeah. Like, he's been like a shot and a half per game kind of guy. Of course, the power play time could change that. And Krug was a huge shooter. So we'll see if any Boston Bruin, because like Grzelcyk in his limited opportunity also has never really been a big shooter too. So like, do all of Krug's blue line shots just disappear, or does someone take on that role now?
I think that's a great argument to expect McAvoy to maybe be better for peripherals than we're expecting, because it's a good point. Like someone like what, they're not going to change their whole system, so maybe they just tell him shoot a bit more now instead of letting Krug do it. It's possible. Yeah. Okay,
it's very
exciting.
likely.
Brian, in our joint league, the one we're doing together, this like cancer fighting league
with fantasy hockey trades with that Brandon and Gamby are also in.
Yeah.
In a different division.
I'm the worst at doing shout outs. But anyways, it's been a really fun draft. But anyways, we got Pasta in like round 2. We got McAvoy in like round like 15 or 14. I'm loving our team. We also have Bergeron, who we got like super late, like round 7. So we're gonna win this league.
Also went third in our league. The third overall. Not third overall, third round.
Oh my god.
Oh.
But I think that's because I may have had something to do with this. Everybody realized how valuable goalies are in that league. And we were just, the goalies went off the board so fast.
Didn't you take 2 goalies in the first 2 rounds?
I thought about it. I didn't. Only because somebody took Hellebuck in front of me. I may have, had they not done that.
Honestly, I feel like even if goalies are super valuable, it doesn't change the fact that they're hard to predict. So why reach for 2 starters that you think are like the 2 best when it might turn out that the middle tier starters turn out to be better? Like Brian and I grabbed Markstrom and I think like the 4th or 5th round, and then we got Koskinen and like whatever. And like now you might be like, oh yeah, well Markstrom and Koskinen, they're not as good as Leonard and Carey Price or whatever 2 like higher end goalies you want to throw out there. But I feel like every year we say that. Like last year, like Bobrovsky, who I know you were really high on, like, you know, like you always assume a goalie is going to be so awesome, and then they turn out, well, not always, obviously, but like I'm saying, it's like it's a bit of a more of a coin flip with goalies and with skaters. So for me, even if goalies are like the most valuable, if it was like a save is worth 1,000 points, I would still probably wait on goalies as long as I could get 2 starters that I think are okay. Then I feel like probably I have a similar chance.
I just wanted volume. I wanted to get the most volume that I thought would be likely to be held.
That's fair.
So I basically targeted starting goalies with bad backups or unknowable backups or whatever.
Bennington, Gibson. Who did you take? Gibson?
I have Bennington, Gibson, and Hart.
I'm tempted to, like, I have a strategy plan for this league, but I feel like I almost don't want to say it because maybe people who we're competing against are listening. But I'll just say it that like in this league, there's only 3 goalie spots allowed. Like there's like a huge bench. Like we have like an 11-person bench.
I didn't realize that until afterwards.
Oh yeah. So it's a crazy big bench, but you're only allowed max 3 goalies, which means there's going to be a lot of backup goalies like available in free agency at all time. And there's 4 moves per week. And I feel like the skaters are going to be super dry in free agency because we're going so deep that it's going to be like boring guys. So I feel like I'm going to want to be using all 4 of my moves most weeks to just stream a different goalie every day in my 3rd goalie spot to get backup goalie starts, which means that I have no interest in drafting a 3rd goalie like high in the draft. I'll just like take whatever.
Had I known that we can only draft 3 goalies when I started drafting, I probably would have done something similar, but
well, just to rein this back in for a second, I want to go on the record to say that I have never made a claim about a goaltender being good and them not being good, especially in the case of Sergei Bobrovsky. He was amazing. His numbers just didn't back it up. Okay, that's the truth. Okay, let's move on to the Buffalo Sabres. Interesting top line in Hall, Eichel, and Olofsson. Pretty different, with a good potential guy in Olofsson and a known commodity in Hall who could have another amazing season potentially under his belt. And then we've got the defense of Dahlin, who I think is a little bit underrated. He's going right around value, but maybe a little bit underrated. Given the addition of Hall, I think makes a huge difference of what can happen on that power play. But of course, I think the big thing to talk about aside from Hall is Olofsson and what we see from him if he keeps that top spot.
Okay. I guess the agreement between us, Elon, is that I go first here. So yeah, so we're talking about Olofsson and where there's room for him to go. Like I could see a lot. Part of me could see a lot of shuffling in Buffalo, and part of me could see none. Like I read a quote because I drafted Reinhart in a league recently, and I was, could Reinhart somehow end up on the top line? But Eric Stahl is busy talking up his shot. And he's like, I want Reinhart to use his shot more. So when we play together, and that just makes me feel like they're getting to know each other and they are going to stick together. I also think Skinner's done on the top line. If he got no play there last year, even with how badly things were going for him, I don't see it happening this year. So I feel like Olofsson's position on the top line is safe. I think where it's not safe would be on the power play. I just don't know exactly what his opportunity is going to be there. this year. Last year, he had 17 power play points, seeing a 65% share of the power play time. And I'm just like between Reinhart and Hall and Eichel, and I don't know. Maybe I just answered my own question. Like, I guess he's like a Stahl, Skinner, Olofsson could be the fourth guy. It's probably gonna be Olofsson. What am I? I guess I'm trying to think of something interesting to say. And
I guess the thing with one thing with Olofsson though on that power play is I do feel like last year especially he played that kind of more shooting slot, like kind of the Ovi-ish spot, just for his handedness on that top power play last year. But I don't think he can do that this year with Hall there. So I'd agree with you that I don't know what spot he plays this year on that top power play. Like what role does he serve on that top power play? Maybe I'm wrong there, but I feel like he's better served on the second.
It makes sense. Like, like that could be Hall's job. Also, this first line is weird to me because Hall, Eichel, and Olofsson are all big shooters, but they can't all just shoot all the time. Like Eichel's one of these centers that actually has like a really high number of shots on goal. Like, so someone's gonna have to change their game, I guess, somewhat if this line sticks together. So I wonder if it'll last, and if it does, I wonder who's the one who all of a sudden stops taking shots. I'd imagine it should be Olofsson, right? Because what kind of crazy person would you have to be like, you know what, Eichel and Hall, sit back, let me take care of this? Like, I don't think that's gonna happen.
That's kind of a scary thing to play against, though, when you've got three shooters playing against you, and any one of them could take a shot at any moment. And I'd say Eichel is a pretty good playmaker as well. I think the question, and I think you're right in this, is like, which one of Hall or Olofsson can convert to being a good playmaker in the case of, say, Hall taking more shots or Olofsson taking more shots? Like, can we see Hall transition into, which I think if anyone, it's Hall that could transition into more of a playmaker alongside Eichel to feed things to Olofsson. But I think that top line is killer. Like, I'm absolutely buying into Olofsson just from an even strength standpoint at the end of the draft. I mean, here's a good ranking question. We've been doing some ranking questions on both pods. Duclair or Olofsson?
Oh, I'll go Olofsson.
Yeah, I was gonna say Olofsson without even thinking too hard.
Yeah,
I agree. Olofsson for me too.
Yeah, and it's interesting that Olofsson doesn't have secured top power play, and yet, like,
I think a comparison, if I were gonna make one, would be Olofsson and Fiala.
Oh, I mean, I don't really like Fiala at all.
I would take
Duclair over Fiala.
What?
I don't like Fiala. I don't like Fiala. I don't like Fiala.
That's scorching.
Like, I know. That's a scorching take right there. I don't like Fiala this year. I'm kind of fading him, honestly.
I mean,
I'm not
I can understand fading him a little bit, but I would still take him over Olofsson and definitely over Duclair. I mean, like Duclair
he doesn't
also
have a centerman. Yeah. That sucks. Yeah. But Duclair might not the second that he's off the first line.
That's true. I mean, I think to me, it's like where Fiala's going versus like Duclair and Olofsson. I feel like Fiala is just much more of a risk than these guys. Like Fiala's going in a spot where I feel like he could still get a pretty good guy that's a little bit more secure, I guess, than someone who doesn't have a center on even strength or the power play. Literally, a center doesn't exist on his power play.
To me, Olofsson and Fiala are quite close. I think what we saw from Fiala is half a season of playing very well.
Yeah.
So, and what we've seen from Olofsson is about the same. You know, we've seen a little bit more than a season of playing pretty well. So, like,
I was so convinced though by what I saw from Fiala last season. Like, I was ready to be like, "There's no way he keeps this up," but there was nothing. Like, I combed through everything I usually comb through. I saw no.
We had him in like a couple. No, we bought in.
Yeah. But you're not buying in for a second year.
I'm not buying in. I'm just saying I'm comparing him into Olofsson, and I see Olofsson's his line mates. Like, he's in a much more secure place.
For sure.
See, well, this is what Brandon does every time.
He could lose a spot. Yes, he could.
This is Brandon distancing himself from my hot takes. This is exactly what this is. He is not. Him in the podcast do not endorse what I say.
Conversation.
I only get to intro teams, and that's it. I don't get to introduce takes. I had one shot and I blew it.
Also one quick thing about Olofsson, then I guess we should move on. But like last year, I felt like he started super strong and he was getting all those power play points. I don't think he was ever really doing much at even strength. And then also it seemed like at some point teams were kind of figuring out how to stop him on the power play, and he wasn't as effective. So
I agree.
I just feel like Fiala is like just such a better player that I don't even care if he was playing with nobodies. I'd still like take him just because I'm going to buy in the talent than Olofsson. I'm not saying Olofsson's not talented, but I just feel like there's at such a different level.
We got to write this one down. Who winds up in points at the end of the season? Yeah, I think it'll be close. I think they'll be within 5 points of each other at the end of the season.
I'm ready to bet. Let's get our wallets out here. But no, okay.
I agree that everybody figured them out, but I also think it's because of the pieces that were around him. Like I think you had Hall, and it just becomes way more dynamic now with power play. So even Stahl, I mean, I don't know if Stahl's gonna be on top power play. I would assume probably makes sense as
Could be.
center. No, well, you have
Him or
Eichel,
Reinhart.
unless he plays the bumper slot. I don't know. But regardless, I think it just becomes a much more dynamic power play and even a dynamic line of 5-on-5. So I guess we'll see. Okay, let's move on to the next team here. And actually, this team, I just straight up have to ask if you like anybody, and that's the Devils. Like, is there a single person outside of Blackwood? I think Blackwood's kind of interesting. Is there anybody else that you like?
Yeah.
Aside from Palmieri. Palmieri's the other one that I guess I like.
Palmieri is like the most boring,
Oh my
but like
gosh, I know.
frustratingly likable. Like it's just like, okay, fine. We're at the point in my draft where I'm just gonna go for the guy who's a guarantee. And now that I said that, he won't be.
Of course.
But it's like, so I own him on 2 teams. And I hate it. I don't like it's just like I just know there's going to be no excitement from him.
He's always borderline droppable, but just good enough to stay on your team because he's so consistent.
Yeah.
And like you don't want him on your team, and he's just so frustrating.
I mean, yeah, they don't have any like super high end guys, but I would probably want to have like Hischier, Gusev, and Palmieri. I think that's exciting. Like I'm curious to see what Jack Hughes can do. Like I think this team is actually like pretty solid overall. Like in terms of
Wait a minute.
Like I don't think they're going to be like a a sure playoff team, but I think they like have rounded things out pretty well. I like how they got Andreas Janssen. Like I guess I really like how they got Corey Crawford. Like I guess this isn't really as much fantasy related. I just feel like they might not be like as bad as last year. I guess also I am kind of hoping this one I'm ready for you to say wait a minute for, okay? But like I'm kind of hoping like PK Subban could not be completely
I'm
done.
not gonna say wait a minute about that. I don't know. Maybe.
It looks like he's getting another shot on the top power play. I saw a recent tweet. Subban, Hughes, Gusev, Palmieri, Zaka, and don't forget Hischier is injured right now. But I assume Hischier's not bumping Subban. He's probably bumping like Zaka, if anybody. So I think that like that could be good. Like Subban's someone I would draft. I'd actually be curious to know. Did we talk about Dumba? I'm really thinking of Subban and Dumba as like the same kind of situation. Like people who have been really good, then last year really disappointed us, and now we go into this season. It looks like they're back on the top power play, and now it's just like, can they get a glimmer of what they were doing like a few years ago? Well, in Dumba's case, just a couple years ago.
I would take Dumba over Subban. I think.
Same for sure.
Yeah,
especially in
I
cats
agree
leagues,
that
because Dumba actually
though.
like does put up pretty good cats.
Yeah, I think to me the way I see the Devils is they're actually a decent option in points leagues. I don't like them in cats leagues. Like Hughes, for example, just not great in cats. Gusev also
nothing.
just
We're gonna have
not
to move
great
on
in
just
cats.
from awful takes from all around here.
I know it's
Forget
just...
the Devils.
All right, let's go on.
Forget it. You know what? Let's move on to another boring team.
Wait, did we not talk about Hischier?
We did not yet.
Okay.
We can talk about Hischier though.
I'm just gonna throw in Hischier.
I'll give you
and
30
Hughes.
seconds on Hischier. Let me put a timer on real quick, and you get
That's actually
30
a good amount
seconds.
of time. That's
Kidding,
a
go
healthy
for
amount
it.
of Hischier
I don't
time.
even need 30 seconds. I'm just gonna remind everyone that he's a first overall pick who like still has a lot of upside. Last year it was super weird with him like sharing time both on top line and top power play with Jack Hughes. Still managed a 51-point pace even with only 10 power play points, and that was a downgrade from the season prior where he had a 56-point pace and was on pace for actually fewer power play points. So Nico, just all I'm saying is don't forget him. He just turned 22 years old a couple days ago. Happy belated birthday. But like with Jack Hughes in the lineup, I know there's limited space for both of them to coexist, but I wouldn't write off either one for sort of surprising and making an impact this year.
One thing we haven't, I would love not to talk about Jersey anymore, but one thing that we haven't really discussed a whole lot is the division itself. Who is Jersey scoring against? Buffalo, Rangers, Pittsburgh, maybe sometimes. And that's
the Rangers
like,
don't give up that many goals, just like 3 a game.
What about Washington?
Yeah, but I'm saying like the option, like the majority of their games are going to be tough to score in.
I don't
Even
know
if you like them against the field, their field sucks to play
I don't know,
against.
Brandon. I agree with you that it's going to be tough for them to win a lot of games, but I think they're scoring. Like, yeah, they're going to have trouble against the Islanders. Aside from that, like
Boston.
Oh yeah, and Boston. Yeah, they're even though Boston's
Philly?
like changed.
Like,
do we know?
Boston's weird.
Do we know if
Even
like
Washington.
non-Chara, like Krug, like they've lost 2 of their big defensemen? So
That's
I
true.
wonder.
Like I guess Philly has Carter Hart, but Pittsburgh is defensively suspect. Washington, like I mean, everyone's gonna shout at me that Ilya Samsonov is a legit like top-notch #1 goalie. We're not there yet, but like
Wait,
okay.
do we agree on this? Oh, we're jumping to Washington next.
Okay.
Let's do it. Let's forget about New Jersey. Let's go to Washington.
Oh, forget about it. Let's go to Washington. I'm excited about this take. Okay, hold on. We need to start with Samsonov because I feel like I'm the only person in the world that has been like, why are we all acting like Samsonov is a top goalie starter? Aside from wins, ignoring wins, like looking at save percentage of goals against average, I just don't understand the like excitement about Samsonov. Like if you look at the danger levels of when any Washington goaltender is in net, they're not very good at suppressing shots. Like they tend to kind of play, I think, very offensive and thus not being that great defensively for their goaltenders and letting in higher danger scoring chances. So I don't know if I buy this. I buy the wins for Samsonov, but when it comes to everything else, I'm kind of like, it's been a few years now since we've had a really great Washington goaltending year. And I just don't get the hype all of a sudden. When Samsonov wasn't incredible last year, he wasn't. And now he has to start without a decent backup. I don't know. What is your guys' take on Samsonov?
Elon,
I'm happy to go.
Yeah. Elon, well, you're going to get two different takes depending on who goes first. I already sort of just gave mine, so I'll just recap it for 10 seconds and then throw to Elon. Everybody's making this huge assumption. I think it's a huge assumption that suddenly he's going to come in and be a legit number one. Like, yeah, he had a pretty good run last year. He definitely caught fire for a little bit. But I just, like, I'm not saying he can't be great. I'm just saying I haven't seen anything to, like, just be automatically bought into. Elon, you have though.
I mean, he has played more than the 26 games he played last year. Like he had a whole career in the KHL where he put up amazing numbers. And I know anytime I say that, then Brian brings up random goalies who have also done well in the KHL to try to like make it seem as if like it doesn't matter if you do well in the KHL. But like Samsonov is like a very highly heralded prospect. Like everyone says he's going to be really great. Like the prospect experts that actually have watched his like scouting, like, you know, like we're just people who like look at spreadsheets, right? Like some people have actually watched his games in Europe and saw him be super successful. Now he comes into a situation where he's the for sure number one goalie. Like it's like Craig Anderson and Vanacek, I think is the name of the other guy that might have a chance at playing games for Washington. So he's going to play a lot. Like maybe he won't have like the most sparkling save percentage, but I don't think you could totally blame Washington for Holtby kind of falling apart the last couple of years. I think also Holtby has maybe fallen off a little bit. And this will be a very interesting year to see, of course, how does Holtby do in a different system? And also if Samsonov can live up to the hype. And like, I definitely agree with you that I'm not like reaching for him, but I also have said I'm not reaching for any goalies. Like we did our Schmo goalies board. I would have put him in tier 2. Brian put him in tier 3 and I acquiesced. But if I could get him like as the 10th or 11th goalie drafted, I'd be like happy with that because he's a starting goalie with a great pedigree. So I don't know. I don't hate him as much as you. That's for sure.
Interesting. Brandon, do you want to add anything?
Well, sorry, Brandon, I will let you talk, but I just like Elon. I don't
he just
hate
smiles.
Him. I do not hate Samsonov. That's not what I'm saying. So I just want to clarify that. Sometimes when I'm not as enthusiastic about someone as Elon is, then I hate him. It's really
You know what? I'll hate him with you, Brian. It's okay. We can hate him.
No, I don't hate him. You're hating him alone.
I think the whole thing with him is not necessarily how well he'll play. It's where he's being considered relative to who's going around him, right?
Yeah.
Like he's being taken in areas where you could get, you know, a Markstrom or a Binnington or a lot of other like seemingly safer bets. And I think that's what gives me pause.
Okay,
Like
I think we're on the same page, to be honest. Like I would have Vasilevsky,
I think
like
we're all
Anderson, Leonard, Hart, Binnington, Hellebuck, Markstrom.
I don't know
like
why,
Gibson,
but when you said Anderson, I thought Craig Anderson, and I was like, what the hell is he
No. Craig Anderson's I'll put a little bit behind Samsonov. But yeah, I feel like all those guys I named, I'd probably take over Samsonov, but I would take Samsonov still ahead of like
Anderson's an interesting one because I don't know, man, that North Division.
Yeah,
there's gonna be goals scored, right. I think.
I can't wait till that division's the lowest scoring and everyone.
I do like that you said you got
scratching their
Koskinen
heads.
I would bet any amount of money against that being the case. Anything. But
is there anything else on Washington? Do they have skaters?
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about Vrana, but you know, I kind of want to just jump to the Rangers really quick because they have a very similar story in that. A Russian goaltender that's coming over his first season, also being highly touted and drafted very high.
The next team we're going
Igor
to after this as well.
So I know exactly where we're going after this because there's another young Russian goaltender in the same division that is important to talk about. So let's talk about Igor Shesterkin. I think that it's a little bit different because of the system in place and the goaltending coaching situation. It's like any goaltender that comes through the Rangers system is just godly. I don't know what is in the water there or what Benoit Allaire feeds them, but it's insane. So I trust Igor Shesterkin. I don't trust the Rangers.
New York City tap water right here. Delicious.
There, that's what it is. It's what gives the bread such tasty flavor. But I don't know. I think he's definitely not worth the ADP he's at. I think the ADP is too high for Igor Shesterkin, but I do think he's going to face a ton of shots. I think in a volumes league, he's much more worth it than an averages league. That's kind of been my take with Igor Shesterkin.
Yeah. I'm the flip side of that. I think he's going to be really great with his rates, but the Rangers don't seem to be ready to start him like say 2/3 of the time. Although we haven't really seen, because like he came in late in the season, he was sharing time with Georgiev, and then like he was in that car accident, I think it was, with Buchnevich. But like in his career, he's never played more than 37 games in a season. So like, can he be a volume starter? I don't know. But he's a guy I'm confident. Like I've seen enough from him to believe that he can shut down NHL competition.
Interesting.
But not Sam.
My problem with him is I've seen him play 12 games.
Yeah. That's enough for Brian. By the way, okay, so I have a question for you guys about the Rangers, if it's okay. Also, I'm a little goalied out, I'll be honest. We just did like a 2+ hour episode about goalies a couple days ago.
Fine.
The Rangers, the big question for me, so one of them that I think has been answered, and I think we already knew, is like Lafreniere is coming in, and it seems like he's going to be a third liner, at least to start the year. Like if you look at the lines they've been rolling, like Panarin and Zibanejad have both been out, and they've had placeholders in there, but it's like clearly going to be Strome, Panarin, Kakko. So Kakko's like interesting, I think. And then Buchnevich, Zibanejad, and Kreider, which is the line they always go with. So I think, to me, like Kakko's interesting. And like Kakko versus Lafreniere, I think becomes an interesting thing, because in drafts, I've been seeing Lafreniere drafted so much higher. And like, obviously in a dynasty league, we're not having this conversation, but like for next season, I feel like Kakko is like sometimes going undrafted or falling to the very end, and Lafreniere is going middle draft. And I probably would take Kakko if he's going to be playing with Panarin.
So my take on this on our episode about the Rangers was that I don't trust David Quinn at all to keep things steady. I mean, they shifted lines all the time. And so I think that if there's one person that I don't trust him with youth at all. I'm not trusting Lafreniere. I'm not trusting Kakko. I'm not trusting anybody on the Rangers. Like, just because I don't know where they're going to end up. I mean, Kakko played third line sometimes. He played first line sometimes. He was everywhere. And I think they're going to do it's tougher to do with Lafreniere just because of who's above him, right? He'd have to supplant either Kreider, or he'd have to supplant Panarin. And sure, he could supplant Kakko on that right wing, but it seems they want to keep him on the left wing for now, and have a really strong left wing, and then have a right wing that resembles the Calgary Flames. That's actually too harsh. They have good right wingers, but that's my own team, so I guess I'm harsher on them. But I don't know. I think for me, Kakko isn't that interesting. It was kind of interesting looking at, I think it was Jay Fresh on Twitter pointed out just how bad Kakko was last year. It was a like horrifically bad season from underlying statistics perspective. And I don't really see how he corrects that this year, because his situation to me hasn't changed. I don't think Kakko's like situation has changed. He started second line last season and we saw him flip everywhere. So to me, he's interesting. There could be something there. I don't expect him to necessarily keep it.
I think everything you're saying is smart. Like, I think the big thing that's changed is he's just a year older. He has a year of NHL experience. Maybe he's grown, practice, like eaten more, whatever you do. He's going to turn 20 like midway through this season. So that'll be something. So will Lafreniere, by the way. Lafreniere and Kakko were born in the same year. Oh no, Lafreniere's born in October though. So I guess he won't become 20 until next season, but they're close. But all that to say, I just think that in terms of like their ADPs, right? It's just like Lafreniere, I think, is going like super high, and Kakko is like totally forgotten. And it's just interesting to me, since I feel like at the least, like I think that they're close in terms of like looking at what they're
between the two of them. I would take Kakko.
Yeah.
Also, I think shout out to Jay Fresh Hockey on Twitter. If you don't follow him, you should be following him. He's been doing really amazing work, and he's like I feel like he only came onto the scene like a year ago. And
I remember following him. Yeah, I remember following him when he had like under 200 followers, and I sent to this brand. I was like, this guy's kind of interesting, and he was like, meh. And now he's like the biggest fan of Jay Fresh ever.
I like
signed up for his
he had
Patreon,
those player
does
cards
everything.
early on that were just like amalgamations of, the analytics of the world put into one like
place. It was nice.
consumable piece of information. And he's kind of like written with that and then wrote really eloquent articles to go with it.
Yeah. So I do want to say one thing going back to this. The reason I think that Lafreniere is going higher is because he's slated to be on the top power play. And I think people are banking on the top power play for the Rangers, which I think is a little over-indexed to begin with. I think that top power play from last season was just a little too insane, especially when you consider Tony DeAngelo's shooting percentage. So I think that's why. But again, I think he could easily lose it to Pavel Buchnevich, and Buchnevich goes up to that top power play, and Lafreniere loses that right wing slot. So I don't know. It's also David Quinn, like I said, and he changes everything. I don't trust him with rookies. I mean, his development so far has been absolutely terrible, I would say, for rookies. And I feel like he's in the hot seat, honestly.
I mean, but this could be a huge year. Like, so yeah, if the Rangers blow it this year and don't do as well as we're expecting, then yeah, that would be a problem. Like the thing with Lafreniere on the top power plays, was he bumping? I guess Ryan Strome, because like last year, like you said, they were so good. So it's like Kreider, Panarin, Strome, Zibanejad, DeAngelo. Why mess that? That's the same thing. I guess we've been having this conversation about Fox and DeAngelo, and some people are hoping Fox will take over on the top power play. But the response has always been, well, they were good last year. Like, why would they mess with that? Yeah.
Did Strome play mostly on the top power play, or was it Buchnevich? I can't remember. I want to say Buchnevich played more on that. No, I think I'm wrong. I think it was. I'm pretty
sure it was Strome.
Yeah, Strome up on that top power play. So I think. Right now they'd have him supplanting Ryan Strome. I don't know if that sticks. It makes sense, like you said. But at the same time, do you want two rookies, essentially rookies, on your second power play unit? And you have Adam Fox down there too. It'd be Adam Fox, Lafreniere, and Capo Caco. That's a young second power play unit.
Adam Fox can handle anything. We love Adam
Fox is a.
You give him 4 rookies to play on the second unit with, and I think he'll be okay. But and also like Ryan Strome isn't that like I agree. He's sort of like ripe for the picking off of that top unit. But I don't know who else. Like I was actually talking to Elon in our joint draft about Chris Kreider. And like, is he someone who could move? Like, what if they did move Strome and Kreider to the second unit to make room for Kakko and Lafreniere? And then they have like 2 sort of balanced units and one isn't too rookie heavy. There's so many moving parts in New York this year. They're a really hard time for me to understand, especially because you'd still have guys like Buchnevich and Hedl in the picture who have themselves been moving around a lot and not quite developed in a linear way. So I just find there's so many unknown variables here. New York has kind of just
gets traded
again, like for the 9th time, according to like hockey's future boards.
Like the thing is, on one hand, like you say, like there's so much up in the air. On the other hand, like last year they stuck with pretty much the same lines, in terms of like Zibanejad, Kreider, and Buchnevich, and then Panarin, Strome, and Victor Fast. Like they pretty much stuck with it last year, and I wouldn't be surprised if. Yeah, it could be like a lot of moving parts, or it could be like we know it right now exactly what it's going to be. And Lafreniere is the left wing on the third line, and he's not on the top power play, and that's just how it is. But obviously, it depends what he can do with his first bit of NHL experience.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. I think Kakko definitely becomes way more interesting, though, being on that line with Strome and Panarin for sure. I'm going to let Brandon, you can walk us into your very boring scoring wingerless New York Islanders and talk us
there's
through
nothing
what
to
are
talk
the
about on
there.
the Islanders. Like the lines are
there isn't really
the same as last year. Like nothing changed.
I'm good to move on.
There's
we can skip.
Honestly, here's the one thing that's changed.
Pulock is good too.
Yeah,
I like
Pulock.
that.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Devon Taves got a lot of top power play time last year, and he's gone. So Pulock could take that spot. If Noah Dobson isn't ready, then maybe Pulock gets an uptick in power play time, and that's
definitely
that's the
should.
most exciting guy.
And even if Pulock doesn't get that uptick, he's still like a super valuable. Like he's like a Darnell Nurse type. You can just count on him for a solid floor and probably more points than Nurse. But like the peripherals are there and they'll come. And Nurse doesn't have top power play upside at the moment, and Pulock does. So I'm into him. But nothing else about the Islanders screams to me like anything is changing from last year. Just like
other than Barzal still not being signed, which is interesting.
But somehow Matt Martin getting a 4-year deal.
Of course. Gotta get your bangos, man.
The Lou way, man. The Lou way. Okay, so we can skip the Isles for now, and let's move over to the Philadelphia Flyers, which if you guys haven't heard, there was a very hot take in our Canadian or North Division preview.
How are you repeating this?
Where I
you are
said
literally
that
gonna have your house burned down.
Elias Pettersson is essentially Travis Konecny last year. Last year, they were essentially the same player from a fantasy perspective. But one is going top 20, the other one is going, 90s or whatever it is. And surprisingly, people didn't burn my house down. People kind of agree with me.
The podcast as an entity.
But anyway, so now we go on to the Konecny team. It was actually really funny. We did a listener league. Someone joined and made their team name. What was it? It was Konecny
son of Elias or something like that.
Oh yeah, Konecny son of Elias or something like that. It was pretty good actually. I'll give him that. So anyways, the line pairings for the Flyers practice today were actually a little bit different. Kind of interesting. So we have Lindblom, Couturier, and Konecny, or Elias Pettersson, however he decides to go by. And then we have on the other one, Giroux, Hayes, and Farabee. And then JVR, Nolan Patrick, and Voracek. That's a deep 3-line system. A little scary because I feel like they can all kind of play big minutes. And then interestingly, we have Provorov and Ghost on the top pairing. I didn't expect Ghost to get top pairing minutes, but here we are.
Yeah, I mean, you got to put him somewhere. And
a lot of Ghost questions now. Oh, put him on the top power play or top line. No one will see him.
Well, at least Provorov is there to like back him up, I guess.
Do something. Exactly. Provorov can hold them all up.
I think it's interesting. So first of all, cool to see Nolan Patrick and Oscar Lindblom back. Like both of them have dealt with significant health issues. Lindblom, I like last year actually, before he had to go for his cancer treatment, he was playing on a line with Couturier and Konecny, and they were doing really well together.
He was good.
So I don't see why he can't maybe that's a great line. Those are probably two of the best players on the team in Couturier and Konecny, I guess, along with Giroux in terms of the type of offensive player you want to be with. Brian, obviously, we'll say Voracek also, but that's a great spot to be. So Lindblom is someone who just wasn't even drafted in the league that I just finished right now. That was a pretty deep draft. So I've got him on my watch list ready for my first injury or one of my first ad drops. I'm excited about him. Yeah, that's the guy that really jumps out to me. The Konecny Pettersson thing is pretty wild, and I think I'd have to really wrap my head around that. I think there's a big difference.
I need to know more.
Would you like me to actually read off the numbers
of? If you just strictly look at stats.
Just looking at just strictly stats from last season is essentially what I was saying. You have Pettersson at an 80-point pace, Konecny 76. Pettersson on a 195 shot pace, Konecny 175. You got Pettersson got 23 power play points. Konecny got 23 power play points.
But what do you think for this year?
Who is who? No, I think it's just more of my point was more that we're taking Pettersson at, top 15 ADP value when there's people out there that can essentially produce the same. I don't believe Pettersson necessarily gives you that top 15 value yet. I think he's still about a year's out from
Travis Konecny also had an insane season, right? He
did,
76
absolutely.
Point pace, 17% shooting percentage. I'm sure Brian would dig up more reasons why it was unsustainable. And I think he's really great. Maybe he's even the best player of the team. But also, I was kind of concerning in the playoffs for a stretch. Konecny wasn't even on the top power play.
I know. Fun fact:
no Pettersson also in the playoffs.
Pettersson also shot at 17%. In case you were wondering.
Yeah, Konecny's shooting percentage isn't necessarily so unsustainable. And his production looked legit last year, which is one thing we really liked about Konecny. Right off the top. So I do think that Pettersson is worth more, but I do agree that Pettersson is getting this bump. Whenever a player's coming up, it reminds me a lot of Patrick Laine in his second and third year. Not that anyone could or should have been wrong about him, but there's just that extra bump when you get a player for the first time, when their value has jumped and you think it's just going to jump again in a linear way, and it's not. Then people like to reach and have the next the new hotness. And I think this year Pettersson probably encapsulates that better than most others. I'd say Svechnikov and maybe Gensel are the other candidates of people oh yeah, I want to get in on the ground floor of this guy just to say I knew, when everybody knows his name instead of just 70% of people know his name.
I like all of those guys. Also, Pettersson's not getting bumped off the top power play in the playoffs, so that's a big difference between him and Konecny.
Definitely not.
I like Konecny. I think he could. I think he could. Honestly, I don't know if this is a hot take. I think he could be a 75-point player again.
I agree. Honestly, I agree too. As long as he doesn't lose that top power play.
I will repeat, but yeah,
it is. But I don't think it's out of the question that he could be, I think, a 75-point guy given, and he did that last season. I don't know if this is necessarily a positive actually, but he did do that with only about 16 and a half ish, or almost 17 minutes a game. So, not exactly a great thing, but just saying there's room for improvement there.
Yeah.
And if anyone wants to say it, like, it's because like his career, he shot 13% the 2 years before and 17% last year, but that's only because like he got that bump in shooting percentage because he got to take more shots and score more goals on the power play, where you'd expect him to be able to improve his shooting percentage. So like that power play shooting percentage lifted the 5-on-5 shooting percentage, and I don't think it's terribly unsustainable. Like, yeah, he shot over 20% on the power play. I'm not sure that's sustainable because we haven't seen him in that role long enough, but I'm also not writing it off completely.
Yeah, agreed. Farabee is a little bit interesting to me on a line with Giroux and Hayes. I don't know why. I mean, he doesn't have that second power play, but Farabee is someone to me that I would watch, I guess. I could also see him swap in with Konechny if it's not working, move Farabee up with Couturier and Lindblom and see what happens there.
It does seem like they're trying to run two distinct lines this time around. I don't know how I feel about Giroux not playing with Couturier. The one thing I do know I like is I don't want Giroux centering if I have Giroux on my roster.
Giroux on the wing, please.
Last time he centered was bad. Then he moved to the wing, and that was the last time he got a point per game season. It's like, you want him on the wing.
Yeah, he's better on the
wing. And he doesn't need to center.
Right.
Like Philadelphia is deep enough with Patrick healthy, Couturier, Hayes, Patrick, boom, you don't need him there. Like there's just so much to watch too. Like you mentioned Farabee. Like I want to know what happens with Lindblom, with Van Riemsdyk, and I think Voracek, by the way, is a good, like, I can't call him a sleeper because he's been around too long, but he seems to be getting slept on in drafts. People are just forgetting about him. And Kevin Hayes too. Like either guys in this top 9 in Philly are proven or have this really great, interesting upside. So it'll be a fun team to watch.
One bad news about Konechny right now. The bad is right now the first power play unit on Daily Faceoff. I don't know if it's here. I'm trying to see if it's in. I don't know if it's been tweeted. No. The first power play unit right now is being shown as JVR, Couturier, Voracek, and then Giroux and Provorov.
To be fair,
points. So no,
if there's no tweet,
if that's true though. If there's no tweet, it's not guaranteed.
It's like nothing. It's just like they have to put something. Like Brock, who does Daily Faceoff, who's great. He always wants to have something there. He's not just going to put X's on the player's name, so he might just be guessing. Like if there's no tweet, to verify
I hope so.
I definitely know that he's not like an insider that's getting like inside info, like, passed to him from the Philadelphia like media or whatever. But
I would expect Konechny over JVR.
Those sound like playoff lines, right? Like that.
Yeah,
that was Konechny off top power play.
I think that's true. I think it sounds like the power.
Can I say
one thing that I really do like is Provorov top power play. It's something that we did see a bit of that last season. We saw it in the playoffs. I want to see that continue, and then I think his value currently that we've been seeing in drafts this season could be undervalued. In fact, I think that if you didn't draft him, I assume most people listening to this now have done their drafts. If you didn't draft him, I would be paying attention to see what Philly looks like for the first couple of weeks and potentially look for a trade, even if it's a trade like down from wherever you drafted your last defenseman. If you can find a way to swap somebody that isn't quite as hot for a Provorov who could be much better than his draft position in a lot of leagues.
I'm just gonna poo-poo a bunch of things here, just to be like the guy with the cold water bucket or whatever. Like Provorov, I feel like could get challenged by Eric Gustafsson and get bumped from the top power play. So we haven't seen.
Yeah,
I'm like down on Giroux playing with Hayes and Farabee. I'm down on Voracek playing with JVR, Nolan Patrick. Like I kind of feel like I disagree with what Brian said about Voracek being a sleeper, especially based on these lines. I kind of like this top line of Couturier, Konechny, and Lindblom, and
I love that top
everyone
line.
Else kind of like scares me. Like I would be afraid to draft Giroux, and I'd be afraid to draft Voracek unless it was super late because of like these line mates that they have right now.
I will get with like the vibe of what you're saying, that this is like a volatile team. Like you don't want to get too invested in any of them. But JVR, Nolan Patrick, and Jacob Voracek sounds like a pretty fun line to me.
I mean, that's because you're living back in the time when JVR was fantasy relevant.
And Voracek and Nolan Patrick, the former top.
JVR is going to get a hat trick, and everybody's going to lose their minds at some point in the season.
Of course. I will say the fact that we like the lines is concerning for me because they probably like them too, and it probably means less minutes overall. I mean, last season we saw Giroux's minutes fall from 21.5 to 19. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see something similar this year with like a 2 top line type thing. And then that JVR line gets, some decent ish minutes, maybe 16 or whatever. And then, the other people are left with the scraps. But that's the one thing that's a little concerning to me looking at this is I looked through these lines and immediately said, wow, these are good, which I think means net negative for minutes for these top guys. So that's the one thing I would at least call out to agree with you there, Elon, is like, I think it's a net negative for everyone that I like these lines so much and that the Flyers are so deep in this way. Okay, so let's move on to the last team here, the Pittsburgh Penguins. Not too much to talk about. Very much the same team from last season, but there is one player that is very important. So right now, the
Kevin Rodriguez
even strength lines. No,
what?
Out of your mind. Gensel, Crosby, Rodriguez, top line. That's why Brandon said Rodriguez. Second line is Zucker, Malkin, and Rust. I almost said Zalkin. Zucker, Malkin, and Rust. But the interesting bit is that you heard the Rust name, and now when you look at the power play, it's Letang, Crosby, Malkin, Gensel, and Rust on that top power play.
Yes.
There we go.
I think Rust value skyrockets, personally.
Why are you saying yay? Did you draft Rust?
I also
okay.
Yeah, I did. In two leagues, and like I was getting nervous when Gamby was reading the lines. I was like, oh no, like as their new info.
As in everyone.
So I was,
we've been hyping Rust up for so long.
That was my audible relief.
Rust.
Yeah, so I can't say I like have a ton of faith he's entrenched here. Like I could definitely see Zucker stepping up, but Zucker's a shooter, like a big shooter, and like you don't need that necessarily on your top unit when you already have Gensel and Malkin and Crosby there. So I hope Rust stays there all season. That would be exciting. And he's a guy like Fiala, who when he first went on a run last year, I was like, can he really? And then like as the sample grew and the data piled, it's like, oh yeah, I think he can. Like this is gonna stay. So I'm hopeful. Like, I think he's at least a 60-point player being in the situation he's in. I think there's upside for even more beyond that. And I like him more than Evan Rodriguez this year.
I like him a lot more than Evan Rodriguez.
What a hot take.
What a hot take. But I think Rust skyrockets kind of up my board now. I was hesitant in our listener leagues to really reach for Rust. But I think now seeing this
Don't tell everybody. We still have more going on this weekend. They're all going to take him now.
We live stream them anyways, and we get sniped constantly because some people say they don't watch the live stream, but they do. So it doesn't matter anyways. Okay. Well, I mean, actually, last thing on Pittsburgh before we kind of finish this off, because this is the last team. What do you guys think about Tristan Jarry? I know you're a little bit jaded on goalies, but real quick, what are you thinking about Tristan Jarry?
Okay, so first of all, I just want to comment because I know we were all joking around about Evan Rodriguez. So just to be clear, like Kasperi Kapanen is dealing with immigration issues, and the plan is that he's going to take that spot with Gensel and Crosby. And I'm not saying I think this is going to happen, but it's also possible he gets a look on that top power play, right? Like, it's like that is another piece that could be someone. Like Rust could be holding a spot. We don't know. So
shoot me if that happens.
Just saying, he's not nobody. Tristan Jarry, like. I don't know. Last year he had like a stretch where he was amazing, and then he had a stretch at the end where he like wasn't that great, and it averages out to still like a pretty good season. And he's the starter on a good team, so he's someone that I would be into like at the appropriate time. Like I wouldn't reach for Tristan Jarry. Like he's a starting goalie on the Penguins. Like he's someone I want, and he's shown that he has the capability to be good. So I don't know, like what I'm really interested to know. Do you guys like hate him or do you like him? I just feel like he's so like just right there.
I don't feel him. I don't know.
I forget he exists. He always goes in the draft, and I'm like, oh yeah, he's a starter now. Like I don't know. He's just like this goalie that I feel like I haven't paid attention to at all this season, and he's just so he's so middle of the pack, under the radar that.
The funny thing is, every time I think about Tristan Jarry, I'm like, what do I know about Tristan Jarry? The last time he saw like a good amount of starts, consistent starting goalie level starts, he lost the net. Who do you lose it to? Oh, it was Casey DeSmith, right? It's like, oh, wait, here we are again. Like, what's actually going to happen here? Do we actually know he's going to be like at least a 60% starter, or are they going to limit his minutes because once he starts taking on too much, he starts to fall apart? I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I have some concerns there. I think Pittsburgh is a good team, and he's going to be getting wins, and like, I don't know. I don't think there's a like there's enough teams in that division that aren't crazy offensive that maybe it'll be fine. But I don't think I'm going to wind up drafting him in most. In fact, I don't have a single share of him, and I probably never will get one, even in the ones coming up this weekend. But
because we forget he exists.
Yeah, and plus, like I feel like he's in that middle level of goalies that I'm just never going to draft. Like I'm either getting like a top 2 or 3 goalie, or I'm just waiting until the end.
Like our strategy with goalies is that we always preach is make your tiers and then wait until there's only like 1 or 2 guys left in your tier and then pounce. And the whole idea is just think that everyone in the tier you consider equal. So we have Jari, I believe, in our tier 3, along with guys like Koskinen and Samsonov, because Brian wanted to put him there. So it's like what we have like 8 guys in this tier. So Talbot is there, so it's like if they all are like could be good, could maybe not be good, like who knows. And so, but they're all starters. So like once I get to the end of that tier, I'll take Jari if he's the one who's remaining, but I'm not reaching for him because I feel like there's just as good a chance of him being great as him not being as great. And like Koskinen and Talbot, I feel the exact same way about.
So where'd you put Bobrovsky?
Also tier 3. Yeah.
Okay. I can live with that.
One thing
I can live with that.
I want to also mention about the Penguins, and this is not something I think will matter this season necessarily, but I feel like John Marino is potentially being groomed for power play 1.
Thank you. Okay, everyone gets so mad at me. This is like
who gets mad at you?
Everyone, like I feel like every question we get on our Discord, people are like, "What? Like, should I take this guy or Chris Letang?" And everyone's like, "Oh, Letang for sure. Letang's the best. What are you crazy?" And it's like,
I like Letang still a lot this season.
I have in the back of my mind, like, there were times. That's fair. Like, Letang is great, but there were times in the past where Justin Schultz would bump him from the top power play for stretches. There's also the injury concern with Letang.
Yeah.
And also, like, I think John Marino's better than Justin Schultz. Like, so I guess we'll see. Yeah. We'll have to give John Marino a shot and we'll see. And like, I just feel like there might be a time in the season when we're going on Keeping Karlsson and you're going on Fantasy Hockey Podcast and being like, oh, checked out this breaking news. John Marino just got a chance on the top power play and he scored a goal. And like, maybe this is a new thing. So like, I actually
definitely needs
Marino
to start
in a
shooting
couple
more.
leagues.
I don't necessarily see him being able to even replace anything that Schultz even was doing on top power play if he's not willing to shoot the puck.
Well, he was just a rookie though, so like maybe he could learn. Yeah.
I'm very much in the John Marino camp. I think Gamby was ahead of me on this, but I don't think this is necessarily this season thing. I do agree with you, especially in the event of Letang injury. It has to be John Marino getting the first look power play 1. He's power play 2 right now.
Yeah,
I think so. I mean, the other option would be like
come on.
They have Mike Matheson.
Power play 1 Dumoulin? What's going
on? No, I think it would be Matheson is the next one they would try. But
yeah.
Oh boy.
So. And like they are gonna try some funny stuff, like as Elon said. Like
Marino's
they always
currently running power play 2 with no other defenseman on there. So
yeah. So we'll see.
In practice lines. I mean, who knows? But that would make sense to me.
Yeah. If I'm a Letang owner, like it sucks that you don't only have to worry about injuries, you have to worry about him being supplanted at some point by some rando. I mean, not that Marino or Matheson are necessarily randos, but like Justin Schultz has been, and like didn't like even Marcus Pettersson, like some like
Pettersson can also do it.
Have gotten turns over Chris Letang in the past, and we can't rule it out from happening again. Like there's just 2 possibilities for heartbreak when you draft Letang, and both are fairly likely. So I generally try and stay away with them unless I'm getting really good value.
Yeah. Once he's like falling to like the lower 10 defensemen, like, bottom of the top 10, that's when you start like being like, okay, now I have to take him.
For sure.
Guys.
Which is kind of when we've taken him. This was amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the show and doing this with us. And if you don't know already or somehow missed it at the beginning, the other half of the NHL sponsored divisions are over on the Keeping Karlsson side. So definitely go over there and listen to those. But otherwise, that's the show. Thank you so much, guys, for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. I look forward to this episode every single season. I'm glad we were able to do it again, even in these crazy times. Thank you, Zoom, even though you don't pay us, but I guess thanks.
Literally nothing changes for us to make this episode too. We're a pandemic or no pandemic. We're still video conferencing. And
thanks to my
all the same.
Well, it's like thanks to my work, Finance It, for giving me a pro Zoom account so that I could stream for free to our YouTube channel.
You've made it when you have a pro Zoom account. I don't even know what that looks like. I mean, that's a weird world that I don't know.
Definitely doesn't stop you at 40 minutes.
Oh no,
you want to hear for 3 hours.
Oh yeah. Anyways, thank you so much for listening to this episode. We will catch you next time.
Bye. Thanks again.